Imagine a man who looks at a crime scene not as a tragedy or a mystery, but as a math problem. This man is Professor Augustus S van Dusen. He is a man of striking, almost unusual appearance, with a high, broad forehead and a piercing squint that suggests a mind constantly working through a complex calculation. He doesn't believe in luck, he doesn't believe in coincidences, and he certainly doesn't believe in the supernatural. To him, the world is governed by a single, unshakable rule: 2 and 2 always equal 4. If a crime seems impossible, it is only because the observer has failed to account for a variable. In Jacques Futrelle's collection, The Problem of Cell 13, we follow this man, known to the public as the thinking machine. He is often accompanied by Hutchinson Hatch, a reporter who serves as our eyes and ears, watching as the professor dismantles the most baffling puzzles of the era. The stories aren't just about catching criminals, they are about the triumph of pure, cold logic over the chaos of human nature. The book opens with a challenge that sounds more like a feat of magic than a legal maneuver. A group of skeptics makes a wager. Can a man escape from the most secure, high-security death cell in Chisholm Prison? The professor accepts. He is stripped of everything: his clothes, his belongings, even his dignity, and placed in cell 13. The cell is a fortress, under constant surveillance, designed to be impossible to leave. But Van Dusen has already begun his calculation. He knows that even the most perfect cage is subject to the laws of physics. Through a series of clever, calculated moves involving a hidden communication line through a drainage pipe, he manages to acquire a few simple items: nitric acid and shoe polish. To the guards, he is just a man sitting in a cell, but in reality, he is performing a chemical operation. He uses the acid to weaken the iron bars of his window and the shoe polish as a makeshift ink to keep up the appearance of a normal prisoner while he works. When the time comes, he creates a distraction by causing a blackout, and then, wearing a simple disguise as a workman, he simply walks out of the front gate. He didn't use magic, he just used chemistry and timing. This sets the tone for the rest of the stories. The professor moves from the physical challenge of a prison break to the psychological puzzle of a locked room murder. In one case, a maid is found dead in a locked apartment after a sudden gas leak. The police are convinced it was either a tragic accident or a suicide. But the professor sees a different pattern. He discovers that the killer, a valet named Jean, had orchestrated a brilliant, if heartbreaking, deception. Jean used a mirror on a flagpole to watch the victim through her window from a distance. By manipulating the gas pipes from the floor above, he could extinguish the flame or let it burn, controlling the environment from afar. The motive wasn't greed or malice in the traditional sense, but a crushing, irrational grief. Jean's lover, Louise, had died accidentally, and his grief had turned into a desperate, calculated madness. As we move through his cases, we see that the professor's mind is often drawn to the intersection of the very small and the very large. In another mystery, a man arrives in Boston with no memory of who he is. He has nothing but a large sum of cash, and the serial numbers on the bills don't actually exist. It's a bizarre, surreal situation that would baffle any detective, but Van Dusen looks for the physical traces left behind. He realizes the man is actually Preston Bell, a financier who has been drugged and sent on a wandering journey to hide a massive embezzlement scheme. The key to the whole thing wasn't a grand confession, but the man's subconscious reaction to news about the copper market and the specific, custom-made shoes he was wearing. The professor connects these tiny, seemingly irrelevant threads to unmask a conspiracy of high-level finance. The professor also has a knack for correcting the mistakes of human perception. In one investigation, the death of a famous actress, Marguerite Melrose, is reported as a high-profile murder. The world is in an uproar, but Van Dusen realizes the entire premise is flawed. He discovers that the woman who died was actually someone else entirely, a woman named Elizabeth Dow who had committed suicide. The murder was a massive misunderstanding caused by a series of coincidences involving a misplaced knife and a woman attempting to elope. By proving that the victim wasn't who everyone thought she was, he solves a crime that wasn't actually a crime, demonstrating that even a perfect chain of logic will fail if you start with a false fact. This theme of illusion is a recurring one. In the Western estate, a family is terrified by what they believe is a haunting. They see a ghost in the house, a presence that defies explanation. Van Dusen, however, sees only light and mirrors. He discovers that the ghost is an optical illusion created by a man using phosphorus and mirrors to hide a cache of stolen jewels. The supernatural is stripped away, leaving only a very human greed. He finds the truth in the most delicate of places, like the scent of a perfume. In a bank robbery case, he uses the faint, lingering smell of violet perfume to link a group of accomplices together, proving that even the most careful criminals leave a sensory trail that logic can follow. The stories culminate in a final, darker investigation involving a missing model named Gracefield. A fragmented death threat had been sent, and the woman had vanished without a trace. While others might look for a kidnapper or a runaway, Van Dusen reconstructs the timeline of the threat to reveal a tale of obsessive, terrifying love. He finds that the woman wasn't missing at all. She was being held captive in a soundproof closet by a mad artist. This man had lost his mind to his own idealized vision of her beauty, turning his studio into a gilded cage. When we look back at these cases, a clear pattern emerges. The professor's method is always a battle between the irrational and the rational. The criminals he faces are almost always driven by the most intense, unmanageable human emotions: jealousy, grief, obsession, and greed. These are the things that make people act in ways that seem impossible or nonsensical. They are the variables that the police often overlook because they are too busy looking for motives, while Van Dusen is looking for the physical evidence that those emotions leave behind. There is a profound tension in the books between logic and emotion. The professor himself is almost a machine. He is clinical, detached, and incredibly efficient. He doesn't get angry, he doesn't feel pity, and he isn't swayed by the drama of a crime. This makes him the perfect foil to the criminals, who are often consumed by their passions. The more the criminal lets their emotions cloud their judgment, the more they leave behind the small physical clues that the professor can use to dismantle their plan. We also see a recurring theme regarding the fallibility of perception. Many of the impossible elements in these stories, the ghosts, the locked rooms, the dead bodies, are simply illusions. They are facades. The book suggests that our senses often deceive us, leading us to believe in something miraculous or supernatural when, in reality, there is a much simpler, much more physical explanation at play. A ghost is just a trick of light. A murder in a locked room is just a clever use of a ventilation shaft or a mirror. This brings us to the power of the small detail. The professor's success relies on the idea that no matter how grand a crime is, it is always built upon a foundation of tiny, overlooked facts. A single thread from a sleeve, a specific scent in the air, a particular type of shoe, or a chemical reaction in a drainage pipe. These are the breadcrumbs that lead back to the truth. In the world of Van Dusen, the massive and the complex are always reducible to the small and the simple. Ultimately, the work of the thinking machine is an attempt to strip the uncanny from the world. He takes the things that frighten us most, the things that seem to defy the laws of nature, and he brings them into the light of reason. He proves that there is no such thing as a miracle, only a phenomenon that we haven't yet understood. In a world that often feels chaotic, unpredictable, and governed by madness, the character of Van Dusen offers a sense of order. He suggests that even in the face of the most impossible circumstances, there is always a way forward if you are willing to look at the facts, follow the logic, and remember that 2 and 2 always equal 4. It is a comforting, if somewhat cold, thought that the truth is always there, waiting to be calculated.